All right. So grateful. I'm Julie Beeling with Beneath Sheep's Clothing. Super grateful to have Alex Newman here with me, Alex of Liberty Sentinel. And Alex, I just wanted to do a follow-up interview with you. Your interview for Beneath Sheep's Clothing was explosive and shocking, going into many aspects of what way worse than I even had known of communist incursion or even origins of America's education system. And, we went into Beneath Sheep's Clothing, all these aspects of the Marxification of education. Trump obviously got elected. He got inaugurated a few months ago. I wanted to get your take on where we're at in terms of how safe is it for America's school children? How safe are we as a country in terms of freedom, the development of freedom, the protection of freedom? And how safe are we with the different globalist entities, World Economic Forum, et cetera? So just, I want to hear everything you have to say. So go ahead. It's yours.
Mhm. Well, thank you, Julie. And I'll start by saying, just like our founding fathers understood, liberty requires eternal vigilance. And so anybody who thinks that we're just going to reach some point where we can all just go back to sleep and get back to our own issues and not have to worry about perpetually defending freedom is kidding themselves. This is a battle that will go on forever. Um, did you freeze, Julie? I think you froze. Oh, there you are. Okay, you're good again.
Okay.
And so this is a battle that will continue to rage on. Now, there have been some positive developments, certainly, and I think we would be very naive to not at least give a passing mention to some of the good things that have happened. Where now almost all the country is talking about some of the crazy stuff going on in the schools. That's encouraging. Is it safe to send your kids there now? Absolutely not. It's no safer today than it was during the last few weeks of the Biden regime. The same indoctrination, the same sexualization, the same dumbing down, all the same craziness is still there. And so, no, it's not safe to send your children to government schools. No way, no how, no way. On the globalism front, I think we're making some progress. Trump has really taken a chainsaw to the architecture of globalism. Especially when it comes to the climate scam, which is absolutely fundamental to the whole global revolution that they're trying to foment. And so that's encouraging. We're not out of the woods yet. A lot of these things can be undone day one by the next deep state Democrat puppet who ends up in the White House. And of course, that's exactly what will happen if Congress doesn't get some of these things enshrined in law. And right now, there seems to be very little appetite for enshrining these things in law. They can't even get the Inflation Reduction Act repealed, which was the biggest climate power grab in the history of humanity. I asked 7 U.S. senators at the UN Climate Summit on the Arabian Peninsula a couple of years ago about these questions, and they bragged that because of the Inflation Reduction Act, they had Republicans on board now. They said we're spending tens of billions of dollars under the IRA in Republican districts, and so now they've got this big constituency in their district, and we're watching that. I was in Azerbaijan last year for the UN Climate Summit. 5 Republicans showed up. Every single one of them was touting their efforts to reduce CO2 levels and all this. So we've got a long way on all these battles. When
Yeah,
it comes to
I have something to say on that real quick.
Sure.
So, Mitt Romney, our notorious senator from Utah, he finished his term, and then we got John Curtis, another supposed Republican, another rhino. His campaign to running for Senate as a senator for Utah was funded by out-of-state climate activists. And he himself used to be the head of the Democrat Party for Utah County. He switched to being a Republican. All the Democrats, not all, many of the Democrats in Utah switched to be Republicans to infiltrate the party because they realized they couldn't get anywhere as a Democrat. So we got one of, Utah provided, the Senate with another one of these fake Republicans who's a climate activist. So anyway, sorry about that. Sorry, America.
No, that's fine. Thank you. And we're going to see a lot more of that. That's been happening for many years. Places like Wyoming, the Democrats know they're never going to win an election fairly, so they just register as Republicans, and all the Democrats register as Republicans. Actually, in Wyoming, they have open primaries, so they don't even need to do that. But that's the kind of dishonesty and shady tactics we're dealing with, and we're going to keep dealing with those. I mean, we shouldn't kid ourselves. So, turning back to education for a moment, I regard that as the most important of all the battles. Even what we're seeing there from the trumpet, I mean, some of it I would argue is good, but a lot of it is might even be counterproductive. And there's a few reasons why I say that. Partly, people don't even understand what's happening, right? You ask your average person who just tunes into the fake media every once in a while, oh, Trump is shutting down the Department of Education. No, he's not. In fact, he has never said that he's going to. I mean, in a few campaign promises and stuff, but even while he's been talking about these things, he's been very open, and so has Education Secretary Linda McMahon, about the fact that they're just transferring these responsibilities to other agencies and departments. So a lot of the health-related stuff, that's going to HHS. A lot of the things having to do with the Indians, those are going to the Department of Interior. A lot of the things having to do with civil rights, those are going to the Department of Justice. So they're just moving all of these functions around to different agencies. And I'm not even sure that's necessarily progress, right? Because the federal government's still going to have its boot print on the schools. It's just going to be harder to keep track of it all because it's going through 12 different bureaucracies instead of one. So I think Trump's heart is in the right place. I do think he wants the right thing. Um, Another related issue on this education front, he's really pushing hard for this school choice thing. And I would urge people to just think about this carefully for a moment. Conservatives instinctively recoiled when they said universal health care, right? Wait, you mean the government's going to pay for all health care? That means the government's going to control all health care. Duh. Conservatives instinctively recoiled when they said universal basic income. Wait, you mean the government's going to give us all free money? They don't have any money. They're going to have to take it from us first, right? And that's going to make us dependent. And so we all understood that was a very dangerous idea. And yet now when they say universal tax-funded school choice, conservatives jump up and down and say, yay! This is another government program, and it's going to come with strings attached, guaranteed, take it to the bank. In fact, right before we started talking, Julie, I was doing an article about how the governor of Pennsylvania just sent $5 million to the Al-Aqsa Islamic Society of Philadelphia to build a Muslim school. How long are conservative voters in Florida or Arizona or Utah or New Hampshire, or pick another state, going to tolerate huge amounts of their tax dollars going to Islamic madrasas to teach kids jihad? And the answer is not at all. So they say, well, we need to regulate these Islamic schools. Well, if they're going to regulate Islamic schools, you can't discriminate. You got to regulate Christian schools. You got to regulate home schools. So to go back to Utah for a moment, the ink wasn't even dry on the school choice bill before your governor was agitating about needing new regulations because now it's publicly funded. So what they'll say, quite correctly, is, well, some people are going to teach their kids crazy stuff. Some people might teach their kids to be Nazis. Some people might teach their kids to be jihadists. We can't have that. We got to have controls and regulations. So this is very, very dangerous, folks. And we're seeing blatant attacks on education freedom in the Democrat states. We're seeing much more subtle attacks in the Republican states. So,
So I want to ask you
go
a
ahead.
question real quick.
Sure.
Back to the school choice thing. So let's say this progresses with the universal taxpayer funded school choice. What is the threat to homeschoolers?
The threat is enormous, and we're already starting to see it. Once the government funds something, the government will control that thing. It's inevitable. It always happens on everything. Think back to COVID. How did they get every single hospital in the entire country to follow the exact same protocol with the remdesivir and the injections and all these other things? The way was simple. We'll cut off your Medicare and your Medicaid funding if you don't do what we say. Right? So, what we have seen everywhere where government funding has followed anything is government control of that thing. And I think the simplest way to think of this is just it's a mousetrap, right? When you have a mousetrap, the cheese is sitting there, it looks delicious, it smells delicious, and it looks free. But when you come and you get the cheese, you get your skull smashed in. Same concept at work here, maybe not quite as brutal, but the end result will be the same. We'll lose our freedoms. And so that's already happened. Arizona was supposed to be the magic test case where everybody was going to see how great universal school choice, universal tax funded school choice was going to be. Well, guess what? They have a Democrat governor now, and within the first couple of weeks of her administration, she put out a press release saying, oh my goodness, all these crazy schools are teaching garbage. All these homeschoolers are doing dumb stuff and wasting money on dumb stuff. We can't have that. We're spending $1 billion tax dollars a year here. We need all of these institutions and families that are getting this money to follow the same high quality standards as our public schools. Wait, what? So now all the private schools are now going to have to teach the same garbage as the public schools? Like, that's literally why we wanted private schools in the first place, was to get out of this mess. And I saw the end goal here, Julie, in Sweden, right? I mentioned Sweden.
Yeah.
I was living there when the trap closed. So back in the 90s, they passed universal school choice, universal tax funded school choice. And Sweden's always the test case, not just for government policy, also for new products, new services. It's a very well-known test market for a number of reasons that we won't have time to get into today. But they use it to test stuff. And early 1990s, school choice came in. Oh, government will fund your private schools. And every private school in the country, with the exception of the one where the aristocrats send their kids, took the money. And then the trap closed when we were there. It was 2010. The Education Reform Act passed. It required all private schools receiving government funding to teach the exact same government curricula, which, first grade, you got to learn gender is a social construct and men can be women and whatever. So right off the bat, and then they banned homeschooling, right, for good measure. So that's where this leads to. And I have the UN documents outlining this strategy. In 2022, UNESCO, the UN Education Agency, put out a report. It was the Global Education Monitoring Report 2022, where they talked about what they call non-state education providers, an equity perspective. And you know the dangers of equity, and your viewers do. Normal people don't. But what they say in very plain English in this report is, hey, we got all these non-state education providers and they're doing whatever they want. They're not teaching the government curriculum. They're not even submitting to the national testing regimes. In some cases, they're discriminating in their hiring and their admissions. Maybe the Christian school doesn't want to do it in a dress teaching the kindergartners. And so we have got to get control of this. And the method for getting control is very clearly spelled out. Give them free government money, and then you can impose all the restrictions. So I know this isn't a subject that has broad appeal among conservatives because everybody is kind of on the bandwagon right now. But trust me, this is going to come back to bite us. I say it with all due respect because most of the people promoting this are people who, I know and I like and I agree with on most things, but they're not seeing the end goal here. I should say as well, Julie, I'm glad we're having this discussion now, right? We're not talking anymore about how to reform the dumpster fire that is the public school system. We're talking about how to get the kids out, and that's progress. I mean, we need to be talking about how to get the kids out, but there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. And turning all of our private schools into government schools, which is what a lot of the tyrants behind the scenes have in mind, right? Bill Gates is one of the biggest funders of school choice, not because he wants your kid to get a solid classical Christian education, but because he wants your kid to be brainwashed with the same nonsense as everybody else. That's why they're doing it. And we have to stop being so naive as to think that the government just loves us so much they want us to homeschool our kids with more money. That's what I'll say about that. And I've been disappointed that Trump has gotten so on this bandwagon. He, in my opinion, should stop this and stick to the things that have broad appeal and are constitutional.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a few people here in my town who've taken money from the whatever that thing in Utah is, where they were giving $8,000 per kid per family for homeschool or for whatever school. And a few of the people that I knew that were like that had applied for it and received it, they changed their mind. They're like, something's not right about this. I don't know about this. Something's weird. I don't need $8,000 a school year per child anyways. I feel weird taking this money. And I mean, I'm part of a program, Harmony Ed. I get $1,800 a month. And for now, it's okay because I'm able to opt out of all the stuff that I want to opt out of. If they ever like bring the hammer down, I'll just say, yep, we're done. And but in the meantime, I do get some funding and I can opt out of everything bad that I want to. But yeah, this Utah Fits All, that's what it's called. A lot of well-meaning people have been promoting it. Oh, I can send my kid to this charter school, or this, not charter school, charter schools are free, this private school with this special liberty thing over here, and I can do this and they can do all of this stuff. Yeah, if it sounds too good to be true, probably is.
Yeah.
Um, what is something that anything that Trump has done regarding education that you think is the right direction?
I think a lot of what he has said publicly is very important because we've been dealing with this Overton window where anybody who says anything outside the Overton window is not supposed to be taken seriously. And Trump has totally shattered that. He has pointed out in very clear language that the reason our cities were burning back during the Black Lives Matter craziness was because our kids were being indoctrinated to hate their country and to hate their family in these diabolical government schools. And so just the fact that we're having this conversation now at a national level is hugely significant. He has also, I think, quite properly threatened to withhold federal funding for a lot of very abusive practices that are going on. So I'm glad to see that. He has very publicly articulated his vision for getting the federal government out of education, which I think is a baby step in the right direction. But we're now talking about moving in the right direction even if it's slowly, rather than turbocharging the move in the wrong direction. So that's all very, very good, and that's all very encouraging. They fired half of the Department of Education bureaucrats. That's a very good start. It leaves 50% to go, but you got to start somewhere. Um, I would shutter the building. And and I think he's talking a lot about returning the power to the states, which I don't think we should want the states to educate our children either. It's not really a proper function of government, but certainly better states than the federal government, right? Certainly better
Unless you
local
live in
government than Washington, D.C.
unless you live in Utah, because we
Right. Well,
really
and there's a
bad
lot of
leadership.
states. Yeah, I mean, if you look at California, Illinois, New Jersey, there's a lot of places where the state is also going to harm your child. I mean, I would argue at this point it's all the states, even the conservative ones, even here in Florida. It's a disaster. But the things that Trump is saying are very, very important. Pushing back on some of this idiocy at the universities that's being subsidized by our taxpayer dollars, I think is very, very important. So I'm encouraged to see that. And I'm encouraged by a lot of what Trump is doing, especially in other areas. Education is one of the areas where I'm less enthusiastic. We should find out here very soon whether we're going to be withdrawing from UNESCO. He did that in the first term. I hope very much that he does it in the second term. I have been pushing as hard as I can on that front. We've got to get out of this wicked agency. It's working
And
to
tell
standardize
us again.
education globally.
Tell us again what's the problem with UNESCO?
So UNESCO is the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and so it's got multiple mandates. But I would argue that by far the most important one is education. And you can't understand what UNESCO is without understanding where it came from and what it was designed to do. It was always designed to standardize education globally, to become what the NEA back in the 30s used to call the Global School Board. And they've been pushing for that forever, and they've been making incredible progress. They have an end goal in mind, which is every child in every school in every country of the world will learn the same garbage. They're not going to get there tomorrow, obviously. They're not going to be teaching LGBTism to kids in Saudi Arabia next week, right? This is a long-term goal, but that's where they want to go with it. And so we need to recognize that that is what they have been working on methodically over a period of generations. And it's at the point now where they created a world core curriculum. And I think we talked about this a little bit in the film. The World Core curriculum was developed by Robert Mueller, the Assistant Secretary General of the UN, called the Global Father of Global Education. And he admitted in the foreword of the teacher's manual that it was based on the teachings of Alice Bailey, the founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company, and these entities that she claimed to be channeling, these ascended masters, especially the Tibetan Jabal Kul. And so that's their vision. And they've been celebrating progress on the road to their vision. Now they say, oh, when we started this, only a few countries had national testing programs. Now over 100 do. And so Bill Gates went over there in 2004, signed the agreement with them to start globalizing education standards, education curricula, teacher training programs, the global technology systems needed. Now they're working big on putting AI into all the schools. In fact, the UN convened the Artificial Intelligence and Education Summit in Beijing back in 2019, where they signed the declaration calling for AI in all schools around the world to transform the values and the attitudes and the behaviors of these children. So these things are very, very dangerous. And if you look back at the
When you say AI, you mean the AI is going to detect what questions will come up next on the child's screen and which concepts maybe they're not grasping onto. And maybe this can be good in one sense. Oh, they need more help with math. Oh, but they need more indoctrination on all the different genders. And this child doesn't accept this, so we need to give them more videos on their device that will brainwash them into that agenda. Is that what you mean?
A big part of it, yes. And sometimes they put this under misleading terms that sound appealing, like personalized learning. Who doesn't want personalized learning for every child, right? But what they're talking about, the end goal here is actually to replace the human teachers. And a lot of teachers don't realize that they are in the crosshairs too, right? They think they don't like me because I'm exposing what's going on in the government schools. They don't realize they're next, right? They're dessert. They're going to be losing their jobs if this continues. And Bill Gates has talked about this publicly. We're going to replace teachers with AI. Right? Maybe you'll still keep a teacher in the classroom just as kind of like a babysitter, right? To make sure the kids don't throw spitballs at each other or smash each other over the head with their devices. But they are very, very clear about it, that AI is going to do the teaching. AI is going to be collecting the data. AI is going to be processing and analyzing that data to determine whether the indoctrination is working. And if it's not, they're going to figure out ways to make it stick. And if it still won't stick, they're going to determine ways to marginalize this particular student so that he or she cannot do anything that might risk infecting others with his or her wrong think, right? So the systems that they are designing are absolutely terrifying. And UNESCO is right at the middle, at the heart of this. And you go back and you look at the people who created UNESCO. You got a bunch of communists, a bunch of New Agers, a bunch of people deeply involved in the occult. In fact, the first guy they put in charge of UNESCO, Julian Huxley, was the leader of the Humanist Association of Britain and also the leader of the Eugenics Society. These wackadoodles who say that some races are better than other races and we should selectively breed human beings like we do cows to create a better stock, a better race, if you will. So this stuff is just crazy. There's no reason that we should be involved in that. And that doesn't even begin to touch on their advocacy for censorship and thought control and internet control and suppression of free speech. It's just a wicked, wicked organization. And folks, make no mistake, it is deeply involved in the education of children all across the United States and all over the world.
So Trump might do an executive order to get us out of UNESCO again. So that would be another
It's
temporary.
under review right now. May 5th was when we were supposed to get the answer, and we still don't have it. We don't know why. I'm not hearing much from friends in DC right now, but hopefully we'll know more soon. He did get us out in 2018, hugely significant, and I'm hopeful that he will do so again.
Yeah. And then are there any significant inroads to being able to withdraw from, let's say, the UN? Is
Well, there's bills in both houses of Congress right now to do it, and I think we have a better opportunity to do that now than we have ever had in American history. I mean, there's never been a time where the stars have aligned, just forgive the crude metaphor, as they are today, with Trump in the White House, Republicans in control of both houses of Congress. Well, I say Republicans.
yeah,
Obviously, we include rhinos there, and so we know we don't have a real Republican majority.
yeah.
But we have both bills in both houses of Congress. We have public sentiment turning against the UN in a very major way, and we have Trump really doing some significant damage to the UN. We just had the U.S. envoy to the UN just a couple weeks ago say that we reject and denounce the 2030 agenda. I mean, this is huge news. That was what the head of the UN General Assembly was calling the master plan for humanity. So these are really significant things. On the climate front, last time around, Trump said he was going to get us out of the Paris Agreement. He played along with the fraud that we had to wait 4 years to get out. This time, day one, executive order putting America first in international environmental agreements. We didn't play around with the 4 years thing. We said we're out effective immediately. And he also said we're out of every UN climate agreement negotiated under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, going all the way back to 1992. So the way this works is every year they get together and they add these kind of additions to the original climate treaty, the UNFCCC. And Trump just got us out of all of those in one fell swoop, defunded all of it. It's incredibly significant, and I'm very, very pleased with this. But again, none of this is enshrined in law yet. All of it can be reversed on day one when we get the next Democrat or Republican who is in tune with globalism. And I should put out a word of caution here too, because it's not all victory. I mean, I'm pleased with all this, of course, but the globalists they're good at making lemonade out of lemons. They
Yeah.
knew lemons were going to be the order of the day, and so they started preparing for this long in advance. And Klaus Schwab actually articulates in his book COVID-19 and the Great Reset back in 2020 how people were getting real upset with globalism. He called it globalization, and they were pushing back. And so he says we have an in-between solution, is the term he uses. And that in-between solution is what he describes as regionalization. And he uses the European Union as the premier example. And he talks about how in North America, we ought to be doing that too. Mexico, the United States, Canada, we should have deeper integration. We should erase our borders. Doesn't use that term, but that's exactly what he's talking about. And that is the strategy that the globalists have laid out for decades now. Zbigniew Brzezinski talked about this extensively, Jimmy Carter's national security advisor. Henry Kissinger, the Rockefeller poodle, he talked about it extensively in his 2014 book, World Order. Gorbachev talked about regionalization. And that is the strategy that they're using right now. So Trump may be taking on the global institutions, but they're even using that to accelerate the expansion and the creation of new regional institutions. So the African Union, Putin's Eurasian Union, the European Union, the CELAC in Latin America, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean Nations. the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, right? All of these different things are getting stronger. They're usurping more and more sovereignty. And ironically, Trump's attacks on globalist institutions are serving as the catalyst to help accelerate that. So, the globalists don't sleep and they attack on any front that they can. So, to go back to your original question, we always have to be on guard against these attacks.
Yeah, I mean, I know it can be depressing for people to hear, that maybe we're not having as much progress and we're not winning, quote unquote, as much as we would be liking to win. But it's just, wouldn't we rather know now when after like everything is lost? We have to do what we can to protect our children, protect our families, take back still our local and state governments. What else? What else, Alex?
Well, I think the most important thing that anybody can do right now is pull their child out of the government school system. Since we talked for your excellent documentary, I have done an even deeper dive into the origins of government schools. In fact, my book was just published last year, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death, Government Schools, War on Faith, Family, and Freedom, and How to Stop It. Chapter 1 begins with a guy that you and I talked about, and that did make it into the film. That is Robert Owen. Who, as I mentioned, we know from a whistleblower, his goal was to destroy Christianity. We have found a whole lot more from him. He was determined to wage war on what he described as the Trinity of Evil. That Trinity of Evil he described as marriage, private property, and religion, in particular Christianity, right? So, just like Karl Marx, but before Karl Marx, right? And then it gets even crazier. So, a teacher, a guy called Dan Murphy, sent me some incredible information. He pulled up transcripts from a speech that Robert Owen gave right before he died, just a few months before he died, at the World Congress on the Advanced Minds. This was a conference that he convened, and he admits
What year?
in
What
there,
year was this? What year was
this was
this?
1857. So this was quite a while after his idea for government education started taking root first in Prussia, then re-imported into the United States via Massachusetts. He admitted in his talk that he was getting a lot of his ideas from spirits. He said he was communicating with spirits using things like Ouija boards, and he explains the process, how he was doing it, and taps and things like this. And he goes out of his way to say, like, no, they really were dead people, right? I know they were dead people because they talked just how they talked when they were alive. And so he gives this big explanation of why he's sure that they're dead people. But, I think for Christians, that raises a lot of questions. If the guy who came up with the idea that the government ought to be educating our children was openly waging a war on religion, marriage, and private property, if he was openly getting his ideas from spirits that he claimed to be talking to, do we really want to salvage the institutions that were created as a result of his efforts? And for me, it's a no-brainer. Of course not. I recognize we're talking about $1 trillion a year Goliath here, and there are a lot of people who are dependent on this system. It's not going to be an easy battle, but you just have to go back and look at this to recognize that this is not the way children should be educated. If you value freedom, if you value God, if you value family, if you value private property, we've got to go back to the drawing board, and we got to stop messing and tinkering around with the edges or chopping off the branches here, and realize that we have a systemic problem, to borrow the language of the evildoers. And the systemic problem is not systemic racism; it is systemic indoctrination, dumbing down, and sexualization of our children. That goes back to a guy who wanted a system that would do precisely those things.
Gosh. Alex, as always, you have so much knowledge to bring forward, crucial information. Where we can find you at Liberty Sentinel. Tell us where we can find you.
Well, thank you. So, libertysentinel.org is my website. We do a free newsletter. It comes out twice a week, and anybody can sign up for that, libertysentinel.org. I also serve as senior editor for the New American magazine. People can find that at thenewamerican.com. And we do online stuff, but we also have a print magazine for people who want something like that, which I think is really good. I serve as a fellow at the Classical Conversations, which is the nation's largest homeschooling group, 135,000 students across the country and around the world. People should check that out if they have kids. I have my own kids enrolled there. And then on X, Alex Newman _JOU. I've been more active there since somewhat of restoration of free speech. And of course, if you haven't seen the documentary, folks, Beneath Sheep's Clothing, you need to go watch it. It's hugely significant. Don't just watch it. share it with your pastor and your legislators and your mayor and your sheriff and everybody else, because this danger is by no means over. It's just taking a slightly different form over the next 4 years while they try to hide from Donald Trump.
Alex Newman, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate it so much.